Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 most difficult Ark tames, so let's get into it. In at number 10 we have the Desmodus, and this is just one of those creatures which, albeit isn't going to be the most difficult tame out there, getting those blood bags for that first Desmodus is definitely going to be a challenge, and also just surviving the whole thing and getting to the area where they spawn is quite a challenge as well, especially when there's so many of them all in one place and you just want to tame one of them and you don't want loads and loads of these things after you. And obviously the getting of the blood bags will be a pain, as it will take ages to extract a blood bag like every 5 seconds from your body, but it's definitely well worth the tame. The Desmodus is one of the most useful tames out there, especially for its sanguine elixir, as it is an absolute taming cheat. Next up we have the Bloodstalker, and this has the exact same taming method as the Desmodus, but why is it more difficult? Well, blood bags are not easy to get on Gen 1 in any circumstance at all, as yes, once you tamed your first Desmodus you have yourself a blood bag farm, whereas that simply isn't possible on Gen 1, and you just have to keep doing that same method and getting hundreds and hundreds of blood bags to actually get yourself a really high level Bloodstalker. And these are definitely essential on the Gen 1 map, as they are pretty much the only creature which you can use to get around, as flyers are banned on that map. And they're a pretty good shout on Arboration 2, as flyers also aren't allowed on that map, although you do have creatures like the Rock Drake, whereas on Gen 1 this is your only real creature which you can use to travel around at great speed, like the Rock Drake on Arboration. Now next up we have the Giga, and I was going to put the Crocodontosaurus in this spot, but I decided to just discount it on the list, as actually that tame isn't too bad and it can be somewhat friendly compared to the Giga tame, especially considering how little resource you need for that tame, and albeit sometimes it can be buggy, I would say the Giga tame is still just a little bit harder because of the amount of resource you need for this thing. And yes, you can trap this thing pretty easily and then you just have to stand there and shoot it, and it's not going to be the hardest tame in the world, but obviously it is still going to be a very difficult one, and considering its size and absolute mass as a creature, you kind of expect that. But hundreds and hundreds of trank darts does definitely take a while to get, and it is pretty difficult to get, as crafting all of those narcotics and then all of those arrows is just going to take a lot of time. And if you're breeding this creature on official, then have fun with raising a creature like this for 2 whole weeks. This is why I am never an Ark official player. Now, next up we have the Golem, and this creature is essentially tamed by shooting cannons into this thing's face, or you can use rocket launchers, but it is a lot harder to do it with that method, albeit cannons' mobilities are absolutely terrible, whereas the rocket launcher you can aim pretty easily. It's just more difficult to actually get it to work with the rocket launcher for it to deal enough torpor before the creature actually dies, as the rocket launcher is more of an attacking weapon where no one, absolutely no one, is going to use the cannon to raid a base in a PvP scenario or anything like that. Rocket launchers with homing missiles will probably be used at some point, and they definitely are used to destroy metal bases, but not cannons. That is kind of more of a taming weapon which can be used to tame things like the Golem and also creatures like the Astrocetus as well. And it definitely does make the tame very difficult, as the cannons are hard to aim and very, very expensive. But it is well worth it, as these creatures are absolute beasts of Scorched Earth, and they can tear through any creature that spawns on that map. Now we have the Basilisk, and this is the first Arboration creature on the list, and actually the next 2 creatures after this are Arboration creatures again. Arboration creatures are actually significantly harder to tame than one may think, and in terms of the Basilisk taming method, it seems very simple on paper. Just get some Rock Drake eggs, that's your only real option on Arboration, but you can use Wyvern eggs, and you can use Magmasaur eggs if you want, and then drop them in front of it without aggroing it, and then it will eat them, and then you have yourself a tamed Basilisk. But aggroing it is very easy, and obtaining those eggs, especially Rock Drake eggs on Arboration, is very, very difficult if you don't have a Rock Drake already. And even if you do have a Rock Drake, it still is a challenge to go all the way down into the red zone and get those eggs and bring them back up. the Basilisk is definitely a hard tame, but a very fun one which you should do at some point, as long as it doesn't bug out, but you know, it's Ark. Now we have the Rock Drake, and you may be telling yourself, well, isn't the Basilisk a harder tame as you have to get the eggs and also not de-aggro it? Well, this kind of becomes a more expensive tame, basically just requiring air conditioners to raise it once stolen, but obtaining that egg and also getting it out without a Rock Drake is very difficult, and you can tame the Basilisk if you already have a Rock Drake, and it will make that tame much easier. But if you don't, then the Basilisk tame may be considered a little bit harder, as there are some extra steps, but you do have to raise this creature as well on top of hatching it, so it is a very, very timely process, which is why I'm putting it higher on this list than the Basilisk. But once tamed, this is a creature which is essential on Arbration, and if you are playing Arbration, then you definitely want to tame these things, as this is pretty much your only real way of traveling around the map like you would with a flyer, and it is such great achievement once you obtain one of these things, and it is so worth getting one of these things, and you definitely really should try and get yourself a Rock Drake as soon as you can. Albeit they are very difficult tames, it is definitely attainable to an Ark player with any moderate level of experience. And the Reaper had to be on this list. This creature is one of those tames with an immense amount of steps. Again, somewhat seeming simple on paper, requiring you to get this thing down below 1,000 health, get impregnated by it, and then just raise the Reaper baby. But there are so many little things which you'll need to do in between that. Firstly, finding a Reaper, then building a trap to actually damage down that Reaper, then going up to it and getting impregnated by it, which can lead to you dying if for some reason it doesn't want to do the impregnation thing. You can tell its health is low enough when it has a red glow. Then after that, you need to get loads and loads of XP to get this Reaper to be as strong as possible. Then after it's raised, it's going to kill you so many times, and Reaper pheromone glands are going to be used to kind of put yourself in the position that the Reaper mother would be in. But once tamed, it is well worth it, as these are the beasts of Arbration. They deal so much damage, and no creature can really stand against the Reaper. They're even stronger than the Giga, really, in my opinion, in terms of force, and they're a lot smaller in terms of their size as well, and they have a hell of a lot more mobility over something like the Giga. In at number 3 is the Rhino Gnather, and these creatures are very irritating and difficult to tame, as their tame method just has a wealth of steps. And on ASE at the moment, and just into the future on ASE, you will just have a hard time finding these things on the island or Lost Island in any swamp biome, as they are incredibly rare. Whereas on ASA, the spawns are somewhat fixed, and they're really not difficult to find at all. So it's significantly harder on the older version of Ark due to their spawns, but you can always just raise your dino count, do the dino wipe command, or anything that helps the spawning of dinos, as long as you're on single players. The dino wipes command, if you wanted to know, is destroy wild dinos, if you didn't know that already. Don't just put destroy all dinos, I can't remember what it is. There's a command like destroy dinos. That will destroy your tamed dinos too, and you don't want to do that at all. So destroy wild dinos, and that is going to dino wipe all of the wild creatures on the map. And in terms of this thing's taming method, you'll want to kill a male Rhino Gnather to get its pheromone, which is a challenge in itself because they have a lot of health and they pack a punch in terms of damage. Then get a Bronto on all of those items which are on screen if you want 100% effectiveness. The Bronto isn't strictly necessary, just use any kind of large creature, but the Bronto is definitely the advised. Then really you want a net gun for this, so net gun it, and then after that you're going to want to damage this thing down to a really low amount of health, as low as you possibly can. You may need to hit it a couple of extra times. I'm using Awesome Spyglass mod here, but that isn't on ASA at the moment, and so isn't the net gun, so you need to trap it in that case. And you can always use the magnifying glass if you don't have any kind of mods to see this thing's health. The torpor isn't really necessary. Then you're going to want to feed that pheromone into your Bronto, or whatever creature you're using in this case. I'm not sure what creatures can be used. The Bronto is definitely advised. Then afterwards it will come out of its kind of net trap, and then it will impregnate a dino, which is where you want to feed it all of those resources. Then it will collapse over, and your Rhino Gnather baby will be born. In at number 2 is the Shadowmane, and this creature really seems like a very, very simple tame on paper, but in fact it isn't at all. This creature just has a wealth of things which can go wrong with it, namely that this creature will just like to aggro onto everything, and you're going to need things like Gilly and probably a trap as well to do this fully successfully, or at least with the most amount of ease. And then getting the fish at the right size as well can just be a challenge in itself, because you know, Ark is Ark. But before we get into number 1, I just want to list a couple of quick honourable mentions which didn't make it onto the list. The Troodon has to be mentioned on this list, so does the Carcharodontosaurus, the Noglin, the Astrocetus, the Astrodelphis, the Titanosaur, all of the titans which you'll find on Extinction, the Managama and the Hesperornis, all having their own varying difficulties in taming methods. So let's get into that number 1 spot. And in at number 1 is the Amargasaurus, and this creature is by far the bane of so many people's lives, requiring Raj Clark 24 hours to actually tame this thing, which is insane for a creature, which, like, is unprecedented for every other Ark tame. No creature has a taming method like this one, and if you do this taming method, in fact, you will probably not be sane by the end of it, allowing it to run around and fight with you until it is tamed. This is the absolute bane of any Ark player's existence. But we can't forget the Fenrir too. This thing is just it's just too difficult. The most unusual Ark creatures. In at number 10 is the Astrocetus, and this is one of those creatures which on the surface may not seem that unusual, but I really can't think of any other game which has a creature like the Astrocetus. And also, this was a very new thing to Ark as well. No space things had been done in Ark, and the fact that with Gen 1 we had a space biome, and then we had this hunking beast of a creature, it is definitely an unusual Ark tame, as in it isn't like most of the other creatures in Ark. And there are only a couple of creatures which I can think of which are as unusual as this thing, and also at the same time follow the similar genre that this thing has of being a space sea creature of sorts. The Astrodelphis obviously being a great example there, that meaning space dolphin instead of space whale, which is what Astrocetus means. Speaking of the Astrodelphis, next up is the Astrodelphis, and the only reason why I would say this is a little bit more unusual than the Astrocetus is its design is more unusual, and also its abilities are a lot more unusual than the Astrocetus. The Astrodelphis is essentially like a dart plane. This thing can just soar through the air and do so many acrobatics and shoot loads of lasers, and yes, it has technically been done before, but you wouldn't really expect it out of this creature, and its design and overall feel is very unusual, and I can't think of any Ark creature other than the Astrodelphis, of course, which controls like the Astrodelphis. And also, again, with the Astrocetus and Astrodelphis, it doesn't really make sense that they work outside of space, but they kind of have to. You know, it is the game of Ark, and there are many other maps, and there are many other biomes that aren't space biomes. So yeah, it just kind of breaks the immersion for me there. But you know, it's Ark, they're fantasy creatures, who knows, maybe they can just dart around in non-space as well, although they do make a lot more sense in space biomes. But obviously, for most of the time which you'll be using these things, you won't be using them in space biomes, you'll be using them to travel across the map, as both of them are great travelling mounts, the Astrodelphis being better for travelling, obviously, as it is a significantly faster creature, and also it's just a lot more fun to ride around on. Next up, we have the Bulldog, and this is strangely one of the cutest yet horrifying creatures that Ark has to offer, and obviously it debuted with Arboration, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't appeared in any other map since, but be sure to correct me if I did get that wrong. And in terms of this thing's abilities, it is just a light pet like the Shinehorn and the Featherlight, which essentially will debuff things like Reapers and the Nameless. Not really useful on any other map, but they're definitely really cute, and the fact that there is a mask for the Bulldog, and you kind of put the Noglin in the same spot here as they are similar creatures, they definitely are respected but very unusual tames. Now, I don't know what it is, but the Managama always seems really weird to me, and the Managama just seems like a creature which doesn't seem like any other Ark creature which I can think of in any way, shape or form. This is essentially like a Ferox type thing with ice fists that can jump into the air and has some sort of elemental power, and that also has ice breath and can freeze creatures. This is definitely an oddity and an unusual tame which hasn't been revisited since. There is no other Ark creature to this day which is like the Managama, and also the spelling for it is pretty unusual as well, but once you learn how to spell it once, you kind of don't forget it, as its name is that unusual. And it definitely is an extremely useful creature. Obviously, as you can see, it can travel across the map with insane speeds, and it deals a pretty reasonable amount of damage as well, which you can't get out of every great travelling mount. But the Managama definitely is great for that, and like I said as well, it is great at freezing creatures, and in a moment you will see what it is like when it does freeze creatures. The only thing you really have to watch out for though is this thing is extremely buggy and will get stuck on things, and it just did get stuck on something there. In terms of its freezing, it will freeze creatures for a very, very long amount of time, which is why it is heavily used by PvP griefers. I've heard not as much anymore since they got nerfed, but they still get used a little bit in terms of PvP griefing still to this day. Now, the Rock Drake is pretty similar to the Managama in a lot of things, but I think it is slightly more unusual, partly because it did come first. Obviously, Arboration was the map that came up before Extinction, and also just the way that this creature is formed is a little bit more unusual. This is kind of like a somewhat T-Rexy chicken. I don't really know where those two creatures came from, but I would just call it kind of a T-Rexy chickeny turkey thing. I don't really know where I'm going with that. It is so unusual in the form that it is, you can't really relate it to other creatures, which is very, very weird, and definitely a sign which it is very unusual. But its taming method isn't particularly one of the most unusual like you would expect from this creature. It is the exact same as the Wyvern. You simply steal the egg from the Rock Drake nest, and then boom, once you've obviously incubated and raised up that creature, you have yourself a Rock Drake. And also they do come in a lot of colours as well, this pink being an example, which is actually quite weird for a lot of Ark creatures, as most creatures do follow a similar colour pattern, whereas the Rock Drake has a wealth of colours, and I actually kind of really like the tealy blue more than the colour which I've got here. I like a tealy blue, like a bluey green is what I kind of like on a Wyvern, not a Wyvern, this is a Rock Drake. Why am I talking about Wyverns? In terms of Rock Drake colour, that is my preference. What is your Rock Drake colour? Comment in the comments down below. Don't know why I said comment too many times in a sentence, but comment in the comments down below. What is your favourite Rock Drake colour? As I'd really like to know. Mine is definitely that kind of like bluey, greeny thing, but you know, some of you may be digging this pink and purple which we got here. No, it's not pink and purple, pink and blue. I may be slightly colourblind. In at number 5 is the gas bags, and this is just a creature which is such an oddity, and also I'm seriously questioning Wildcard here. How did they come up with the idea for this? Or did we come up with the idea for this? Honestly, I don't know, but somehow this thing was created, and it's been in the game since Extinction, and I don't really get how it came around or how the idea came for it. It's literally a farting gas animal which flies on its own gas. It's a very, very weird premise, but actually a very cool creature which doesn't require a saddle. The saddle's only there if you have friends, unlike me, because I don't really have friends that I play Ark with, or friends in general, you know, living that life. But that saddle is there if you do have friends, unlike any YouTuber which you can really think of. Us YouTubers, yeah, but we don't really get the friends. This is why we do YouTube, you know. But if you do have friends, then your friend can go on the saddle, and then you can travel together, which is nice, you know. The Diplodocus has a significantly higher passenger count, but that's not on the list because that isn't a very interesting or unusual creature. Anyway, I should stop talking about the Diplodocus. What's actually good about the gas bags? Well, on Extinction, this is actually one of the best creatures out there for gathering metal. Obviously, you still have the RG, and the gas bags is significantly harder to control than the RG, but it is a lot cuter. And it's just, I like using the creatures which came on that map, and I always try to use the gas bags as long as I can control it at the time to do some metal runs. And once you learn it, it is a really, really great creature for doing those metal runs, if you don't just get stuck in a trench with loads of wyverns and get killed a couple of times. That happened because I forgot to enable creative mode stupidly for this b-roll, but you know, editing, it looks like I did nothing wrong and I escaped perfectly, but there was multiple attempts in this, and then I flew too high and I got up caught into the world border. I am definitely not a great pilot of the gas bags. Also, if you find yourself like this make sure to dismount just before you hit the ground, it'll save you. Now, the Rhino Ganatha, I think, came from us. It was from some kind of creature voting thing anyway, and we did vote for this creature to be in the game, and it is one of the more unusual ones. There isn't any other Ark creature which is really like this thing. And also, I know loads of people are saying Rhino Ganathas are rare, and I get that they're rare. On ASA at the moment, I've seen about 5 Rhino Ganathas in the swamp biome. Is there an overspawn of Rhino Ganathas on ASA? Wildcard, can you tell me please, if you're watching this video, because I've had way too many encounters with this thing. I've seen 1 Giga, and I've seen 5 Rhino Ganathas, and these things are generally a lot rarer than a Giga, as they only spawn in one specific biome, whereas Gigas can spawn on several places around the map. In terms of the Rhino Ganatha's uses though, this thing is essentially just an upgraded Quetz, which is a lot faster and deals more damage. As unlike a Quetz, it will deal more damage. It is significantly harder to tame and uses the taming method, which the Reaper has, which I'll talk about because the Reaper is ahead on this list. Oh my god, spoilers. But either way, the Reaper is ahead on this list, so I'll talk about his taming method similarly there. But you can always check out my Rhino Ganatha taming guide if you want to know fully, in detail, how to tame this thing. And you'll see brief b-roll of me actually taming it, because this is from the guide video. I was just a little bit lazy at the time, and I was just like, I'll take my guide video, and then I'll just chuck that into b-roll, which is obviously why you're seeing me tame it here, and you're not seeing me tame every other Ark creature in all of the other b-rolls. But it is a very long and arduous taming process, which is extremely difficult and requires 2 Rhino Ganathas, not 1. You're going to need 2 of those things, and you're going to need a pheromone, you're going to need to kill one, and then yeah, there's so much. Just check out the tutorial. I really shouldn't talk about it more. The Rhino Ganatha is just one of those creatures which is really unusual, and we voted for, and for some reason spawns way too much on ASA. Have no idea why, but it does. This is the Rhino Ganatha. It's one of Ark's most unusual tames. The spoiler is here, with the Reaper being in at number 3, and the Reaper is a even more unusual tame than the Rhino Ganatha, as obviously it came way before. The Rhino Ganatha is the most recent creature which has been added to Ark, apart from the Phasalosuchus. Don't know if that is in ASA at the moment, but I'm going to count that as the most recent Ark creature. Is that thing coming to Scorched Earth or the island? Either way, it might not be here yet, so don't take my word on that one. Not quite sure. That may be a Scorched Earth creature. Actually, thinking about it, that is a Scorched Earth creature. The Rhino Ganatha was the one for the island. Yes, the Rhino Ganatha is the latest creature of Ark at the moment. And the Reaper has obviously been in Ark for ages. It came out in Arboration. That was way back in 2017. And this thing was such an oddity at the time, but it really fits into that map, and its taming method is one of the most unusual in the game. Essentially what you do is you'll get a Reaper Queen to a really low amount of health. You can use a trap for this, it will make it so much easier, and you can use light pets as well. Not for the other bit of the taming method though, as that won't work with a light pet. You can't have a light pet when this thing impregnates you when you go up to it after you put its health down. At least I'm pretty sure you can't. Don't anyway, as it may somewhat fail, as the Reapers really do not like light pets. But after you have been impregnated by the Reaper, obviously after you've damaged it and the impregnation has occurred, you just get a ton of XP, and then boom, you have yourself a Reaper. In at number 2 is the Bloodstalker, and this is just essentially a spider with, I don't think 8 eyes, but it may have 8 eyes, or it may have 12. Honestly, comment down below how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as right now I don't know. I'm sure I could look up an image, but I know one of you out there knows the answer to this. Well, obviously you can tell why the Bloodstalker is so unusual. No other Ark creature is really like this, and you could say the Aranio is another kind of spidery thing, but that is just kind of like a normal spider. The Bloodstalker is like a vampire, blood-sucking Spider-Man thing with an obscene amount of eyes. It may be 8, it may be 12, I'm not quite sure. Make sure to let me know. I want to know how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as I'm really not sure, as I have not seen one up close and personal for a while. But also, this thing's taming method is very much an oddity. Like no other Ark creature, apart from the Desmodus, obviously, off the top of my head, which I can think of, has the same taming method. You essentially get blood bags, which you'll need to syringe out of your body, or you can obviously use the Desmodus to harvest them now, but originally you just had to use the blood syringe to get those, and then it will just eat those, and then you'll tame yourself a Bloodstalker, and you can feed it some creatures before to get 100% effectiveness. But honestly, I've never bothered with that, as I'm not going to do like insane things with this creature. Like, I'm not going to fight bosses with the Bloodstalker. I just want a good one, And obviously for missions, you're not even going to need a Bloodstalker, but it is good to get one, obviously, so you can get to those missions, so you can get all of those hexagons. But before you get a Bloodstalker, you should definitely go to the Bogrish missions to practice. And finally, in at number 1 is the Velonosaur. And the reason why I have put this thing in at number 1 isn't because it has the weirdest taming method or anything along those lines. It is just, there has never been any kind of creature like the Velonosaur apart from the Velonosaur. I can think of no other Ark creature like this tame. And albeit, yes, it does have one of the simplest taming methods out of all of the creatures on the list. It is just a very simple knockout tame. No other Ark creature compares to this thing in terms of what it is. This thing, again, is just a moving turret, and there's no other creature which does this like the Velonosaur. And sadly, the damage of the turrets doesn't scale with melee, but obviously you can keep leveling up that stamina to shoot even more turrets out. And obviously I wouldn't recommend it in this close of a proximity, but it is definitely an extremely useful thing, which when you ride this thing you will use a lot. But it also just have your general just attack, hack and slash, and it also can shake spines off of it as well. And also I think when you look at it head on when it's shooting turrets, it's a little bit creepy. That animation just to me is a little bit on the creepy side. So thank you to my wonderful patrons Ekaterina Puchkova, Karina Thorne, Dominic Masijewski and Ethan Tapia, who have all supported me through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you want to join this list, then go join Patreon or YouTube members, but thanks to all of these guys.